Hello, back again. This week we've fairly done with Newcastle. I could ramble on about it, but we're going to look at Chester and the Chester assay office. It's going to take, I'm going to try to be, I've noticed with all these antiques things that are all these short films and videos, none of them are particularly detailed that you see on Instagram or YouTube, or they're wrong. So it's going to take some time. There'll be various parts to this, and hopefully I'm going to overload you with facts and genuinely useful information, but which is always arguable. Now, you can go and you can buy a copy of Jackson's Hallmarks. You can buy the little pocket guide or the massive big book, and this will tell you all of the things about hallmarking that I'm going to tell you. But this is just a run through. This is to acquaint you with it, but also to tell you more about the objects and how difficult or easy it is to collect Chester silver, if that's something you want to do. There is also something we'll touch on called the Chester paradox, which has nothing to do with Doctor Who, you'll be relieved to hear. But we'll get to that, and probably in another part. I don't want to keep these too long, because I know some of you are, by the demographics, some of you are quite elderly and you want to get back to sleep, don't you? Yes, I don't blame you. You're not going to see, I mean, make me a liar. I'd love it if you did. You're not going to see any 16th century Chester silver, although it was made in the 16th century. You're looking at things in museums, in churches, communion vessels, extremely rare. I have never seen a piece of 16th century Chester silver in the wild in 30 years. Maybe somebody else has, maybe a communion cup turned up somewhere, but it just doesn't come up. So we'll skip that. 17th century, again, first half of the 17th century, forget it. If that's what you're going to collect, you're not going to collect anything. Second half of the 17th century, but really when we say that with Chester we mean the late 17th century, the odd thing does turn up. Now, the very first system of hallmarking that they had was either a maker's mark to begin with, and latterly towards the end of the 17th century they would sometimes, but not always, accompany that with a sterling punch. And that's not a mark, that is the word sterling struck. Sometimes it's, well, often it's split in two. So you get STR over LING in a little punch, and it's struck on it. And that's an early Chester way of saying this is sterling silver. You'll also get abbreviations of it. You'll get just stir, or because sometimes sterling was spelt starling, as in the bird, you'll get STA. And all these marks are noted down in Jackson's. The problem, of course, is that lots and lots of things are stamped sterling. So, you know, just because you see the word sterling, you know, the chances that it's a piece of Chester are infinitesimal, believe me. And even when you see it on early silver, because during the 18th century at Sheffield, before they had an assay office, particularly when they're making cutlery, they will stamp sterling on the handles. And I can't tell you the number of times I've had to gently disabuse somebody who thinks they've got, you know, the rarest Chester table knife in the world, and I've had to take them to one side and stifle my laughter and no, I'm not that cruel. Well, maybe I am. And tell them that actually it's mass-produced, albeit Georgian mass-produced, Sheffield silver, and they've gone away sobbing into their handkerchief. So you're not, basically, I'm not saying you're never going to see a piece of 17th century Chester silver, but you're never going to see a piece of 17th century Chester silver, which is a shame, because in 1686 all the goldsmiths at Chester banded together and they established properly the assay office and instituted an annual system of marking. Just as the other centres, a date letter. They had two town marks, if you like. The old city coat of arms, which are 3 wheat sheaves with an upturned dagger, and then the crest that would have been on top of that, which was a dagger with a scrolled handle and a maker's mark. And what's really sad is they're the most beautiful marks. And I've seen them in books, obviously, but I've only seen 2 examples on 2 Treffid spoons in 30 years. They're lovely things. Both of those spoons made many thousands of pounds. You will be lucky to see those marks in the flesh. And if you do, unless you are, blessed from above, the piece that you're looking at, it's almost certainly going to be a Treffid spoon, and it's almost certainly going to be in excess of £5,000. And if it's the really nice one that came up about 15 years ago, it'll be £10,000 or £12,000. Again, in 1697, like all the other assay offices we're looking at in this sort of series, Newcastle, Chester, Exeter, York, again, 1697, the assay office is shut down, which is really sad because that system of hallmarking is abandoned. And they are beautiful. Find them in a book and look at them because they are beautiful hallmarks. In 1701, it starts up very much like the other assay offices did. It adopts London-style punches alongside its own town mark. But at this point, from the 1686 to 1697 cycle, which had been 3 wheat sheaves and a dagger, that town mark changes. It changes to the divided, the more updated arms of Chester, which is half of that mark, and then a little division and symbols, and it's a coat of arms. Now, I've got a reasonable... I've had to borrow these things off somebody else. So, please don't ask me if they're for sale, because he'd be absolutely offended. But this lovely marrow scoop, not for vegetable marrow, for bone marrow, but I know you all know that. Roasted bone marrow out of a bone. You've seen Rick Stein, haven't you, do it when he's making his Bordelaise sauce. Yes, let's not talk about food too much, but you've seen it, you know what you're talking about. Lovely marrow scoop, lovely heavy thing. A lot of Chester silver is Chester flatware is beautifully made. This has got an early set of marks. It's got the maker's mark at the bottom, RR. You will see the maker's mark. If you see 18th century Chester silver, probably more than half of it will have the maker's mark RR on it. The biggest family, in fact, the family of Chester silversmiths in the 18th century were the Richardsons. And it goes from Richard Richardson the First all the way up to Richard Richardson the Fourth. I'm not going to keep saying that because it's a tongue twister. But this is Richard Richardson the Second. It's got a standard mark, so that's the lion passant. It's got the leopard's head. So again, all this stuff is going to have a leopard's head on it, and I'll show you a piece later, which confuses people, and sometimes people sell it you as London, and it's a happy day when that happens, believe me. It's got the later style town mark, which is that divided coat of arms, and a date letter, and in this case it's 1731, and that's a rare thing. Lovely condition, lovely marks. I'm sure my friend won't mind me telling you that at a good antiques fair is well worth £1,000, and you will probably struggle to find an example. Now I'm going to try and keep these brief, and we'll have more parts to them, so we'll just end it there briefly, and we'll be back with part 2 in a moment.